Detective Sarah Martinez pushed her reading glasses up her nose and studied the crime scene, photographs scattered across her cluttered desk for the 100th time that week. The fluorescent lights of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across images that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Steam rose from her coffee mug, the liquid long gone cold, as she'd become absorbed once again in the details of the Thompson case, a case that had consumed her every waking moment for the past 6 months. The first photograph showed the front door of 1247 Maple Street, its wooden frame splintered where the deadbolt had been kicked in with brutal force. The second revealed the ransacked living room, overturned furniture, scattered family photos with their glass frames shattered, and children's toys strewn across the hardwood floor like casualties of war. But it was the third photograph that made Martinez's stomach clench every time 19-year-old Ashley Rodriguez, lying motionless in a pool of crimson blood, her blonde hair matted against the kitchen tiles, one arm stretched protectively toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. Ashley had been babysitting 3-year-old Emma Thompson that October evening while Emma's parents, Lisa and Michael, attended their 10th wedding anniversary dinner at Antonio's, their favorite Italian restaurant downtown. The couple had been looking forward to their rare night out for weeks, finally trusting someone other than family to watch their precious daughter. Ashley, a college sophomore studying elementary education, had come highly recommended by their neighbors. She was responsible, caring, and wonderful with children. She was also the reason Emma Thompson was still alive. According to the forensic timeline, the attack began at approximately 9:47 p.m. when the intruder forced his way through the front entrance. Ashley had been in the kitchen preparing Emma's bedtime snack, animal crackers and chocolate milk, Emma's nightly ritual, when she heard the door explode inward. Security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera captured only a shadowy figure in dark clothing and a ski mask moving swiftly across the Thompsons' front yard. But the timestamp corroborated the timeline perfectly. What happened next could only be pieced together through evidence and Ashley's fragmented memories from her hospital bed. The young woman had immediately grabbed the house phone to dial 911, but the intruder reached her before she could complete the call. The dispatcher recorded exactly 4 seconds of audio. Ashley's terrified voice saying, "Help me, someone's broken into," followed by a sickening crash and the line going dead. The baseball bat found at the scene told the rest of Ashley's story. The Louisville Slugger, ironically stolen from the Thompson family's own garage weeks earlier during a string of neighborhood break-ins, bore Ashley's blood and the intruder's fingerprints. Ashley had fought valiantly, evident from defensive wounds on her arms and hands, buying precious time for Emma to escape to her bedroom. The babysitter's heroic stand lasted nearly 10 minutes before she finally succumbed to her injuries and collapsed unconscious. But here's what made Detective Martinez's blood run cold every time she reviewed the case. Emma had witnessed everything. The 3-year-old had been playing in her bedroom with her stuffed animals when the commotion began. According to child psychologists who later interviewed her, Emma's natural instinct had been to investigate the loud noises downstairs. She'd crept to the top of the staircase and peered through the banister railings, her small hands gripping the wooden posts as she watched the masked intruder methodically destroy her home. Emma saw him rifle through her mother's jewelry box, dump out drawers of important papers, and tear paintings from the walls, searching for a hidden safe that didn't exist. She watched him answer his cell phone and have a heated conversation with someone about finding the money and checking upstairs next. Most crucially, she witnessed the moment that would later prove his undoing. The intruder removing his ski mask to wipe sweat from his face during that phone call, revealing features that would be burned into her memory forever. When the masked man finally headed toward the staircase, Emma's survival instincts kicked in with remarkable clarity for such a young child. She scrambled back to her bedroom and dove into her walk-in closet, burying herself beneath a pile of dress-up clothes and winter coats. She pulled her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, close to her chest and remained perfectly silent as heavy footsteps moved through her room just inches away from her hiding spot. The intruder spent nearly 20 minutes ransacking the upstairs bedrooms, growing increasingly frustrated at finding nothing of significant value. Emma later told therapists she counted to 1,000,000 while listening to him throwing toys and furniture around her room. A child remained hidden for another hour after the house fell silent, paralyzed with terror and uncertainty about whether the scary man had truly left. Police arrived at 10:23 p.m., responding to a neighbor's report of suspicious activity and the earlier incomplete 911 call. They found Ashley clinging to life and immediately called for paramedics. It took another 30 minutes to locate Emma in her closet, catatonic with shock but physically unharmed. The sight of the tiny girl clutching her elephant among the destroyed remnants of her childhood sanctuary broke the hearts of even veteran officers who thought they'd seen everything. The suspect, Marcus Rivera, had been arrested 2 days later when his fingerprints matched the bat and other evidence at the scene. A career criminal with a history of burglary and assault charges, Rivera fit the profile perfectly. His alibi was weak, his associates were known criminals, and his cell phone records placed him in the neighborhood that night. It should have been an open and shut case. But there was one devastating problem. Emma Thompson hadn't spoken a single word since that terrible night. Dr. Rebecca Chun, the county's leading child trauma specialist, diagnosed Emma with selective mutism, triggered by severe psychological trauma. The little girl who had once chattered constantly about her favorite cartoons, soon nursery rhymes, and asked endless questions about everything around her, had retreated into complete silence. She communicated only through gestures and expressions, nodding or shaking her head in response to simple questions, but never uttering a sound. Without Emma's testimony, the prosecution's case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence. Rivera's expensive defense attorney, Patricia Walsh, had successfully argued in preliminary hearings that fingerprints on a stolen bat and suspicious cell phone records weren't sufficient for conviction beyond reasonable doubt. She painted her client as a petty thief who might have burglarized the house days earlier, with no connection to the violent assault on Ashley Rodriguez. The trial was scheduled to begin in exactly 2 weeks. District Attorney Monica Sterling knew that without Emma finding her voice, Marcus Rivera would walk free and likely strike again. The pressure was mounting from Ashley's family, the Thompson family, and a community that demanded justice for the innocent victims of Rivera's violence. Detective Martinez closed the case file and rubbed her tired eyes. Somewhere in this city, a dangerous predator sat in his jail cell, counting down the days until his freedom. And somewhere else, a traumatized 3-year-old girl held the key to justice locked away in her silent heart, waiting for someone or something to help her find the courage to speak again. Time was running out, but Sarah Martinez refused to give up. His case had become personal, and she would exhaust every possible avenue to ensure that Emma Thompson's voice would be heard when it mattered most. The mahogany-paneled conference room at the district attorney's office buzzed with tension as Monica Sterling reviewed her legal options for the final time. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across stacks of case files, psychological evaluations, and medical reports that represented 6 months of desperate preparation. Seated around the polished table were the key players in what had become the most closely watched criminal case in Riverside County's history. Detective Sarah Martinez, child psychologist Dr. Rebecca Chun, victims advocate Jennifer Walsh, and Assistant District Attorney David Park. "Let's be brutally honest about where we stand," Sterling said, her voice carrying the weight of impending defeat. Without Emma's testimony, we're asking a jury to convict Marcus Rivera of attempted murder, based solely on circumstantial evidence. His fingerprints on a bat that was stolen weeks before the attack, cell phone records placing him in the general area, and a history of burglary charges. Patricia Walsh will argue that proves nothing more than theft, not attempted murder. Dr. Chun shifted uncomfortably in her leather chair, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses as she opened Emma's thick psychological file. "I've worked with traumatized children for 15 years, she began, her voice soft but authoritative. Emma's case is particularly complex because her selective mutism is specifically triggered by memories of that night. She communicates normally. About everything else: school, her toys, her parents, even her dreams about unicorns and princess castles. But the moment anyone mentions the break-in, Ashley's attack, or anything related to that evening, she retreats into complete silence." Detective Martinez leaned forward, frustration evident in her voice. "So we're supposed to just let this monster walk free? Rivera's laughing at us from his cell, knowing that a 3-year-old's trauma is his ticket to freedom. He'll be back on the streets in 2 weeks, and God knows which family he'll target next." The room fell silent as everyone grappled with the harsh reality. Through the conference room's glass wall, they could see the busy courthouse across the street, where in exactly 14 days, Judge Harold Brennan would likely dismiss all charges against Marcus Rivera due to insufficient evidence. "There has to be something we haven't tried," Sterling insisted, pacing behind her chair. "Some legal precedent, some therapeutic breakthrough, some way to help Emma communicate what she witnessed without re-traumatizing her further." Dr. Chun opened a manila folder containing Emma's therapy session notes. "Actually, there might be something. In our last few sessions, I've noticed Emma responds remarkably well to animal therapy. When we bring in the therapy dogs from the children's hospital, her entire demeanor changes. She becomes animated, talkative, even giggly. Last Tuesday, she spent 20 minutes telling a golden retriever named Buddy all about her favorite cartoons." Assistant Day Park looked up from his legal briefs with sudden interest. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Bringing an animal into a criminal courtroom during testimony?" "It's not unprecedented," Sterling replied, her mind already racing through possibilities. "I've read about cases in other states where therapy animals assisted child witnesses. There's a case in Oregon from 2019 where a Labrador accompanied a 7-year-old sexual assault victim during her testimony. The conviction was upheld on appeal." Jennifer Walsh, who had been quietly reviewing victim impact statements, suddenly spoke up. "The Thompson family is desperate. Lisa told me yesterday that Emma still wakes up screaming 3 or 4 nights a week. Michael hasn't returned to his normal work schedule because he's afraid to leave Emma alone, even with professional caregivers. They're willing to try anything if it might help their daughter heal and bring Rivera to justice." Dr. Chun pulled out a photograph from Emma's file, a picture drawn during art therapy showing stick figures of Emma, her parents, and a large brown dog with a happy face. "Emma's always been drawn to dogs, even before the trauma. According to her parents, she constantly asks when they can get a puppy. In her drawings during therapy, she often includes dogs as protective figures watching over her family." Sterling stopped pacing and fixed her gaze on Dr. Chun. "What would you need to make this work? What kind of setup would give Emma the best chance of feeling safe enough to speak?" "The courtroom environment would need to be completely modified," Dr. Chun explained, pulling out her notes from similar cases she'd researched. "Minimal people present, no spectators, no media, just essential legal personnel. Emma would need her parents nearby, and I'd recommend having the therapy animal present before she enters the room so she can acclimate. The dog would need to be specially trained, calm, and experienced with traumatized children." Detective Martinez's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her expression shifted. "This is interesting timing. I just got a message from Officer Jake Morrison in our K-9 unit. He's been following Emma's case and wants to help. His partner Rex has actually been working with the county's victim services program for 2 years, helping trauma victims during interviews." "Tell me more about this, Rex," Sterling demanded, sensing a potential breakthrough. "German Shepherd. 7 years old, specially trained not just in drug detection and suspect apprehension, but also in victim assistance," Martinez explained, scrolling through Morrison's text. "Rex has worked with dozens of assault victims, domestic violence survivors, and traumatized witnesses. Morrison says the dog has an almost supernatural ability to sense when someone needs comfort and protection." Sterling felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. "Dr. Chun, in your professional opinion, could the presence of a trained therapy dog potentially help Emma overcome her selective mutism enough to provide testimony?" Dr. Chun considered the question carefully, weighing the risks and benefits. "It's possible. Emma's silence isn't due to memory loss or confusion. It's a psychological defense mechanism. If we can create an environment where she feels truly safe and protected, where her fight or flight response is calmed by the presence of a protective animal, she might be able to access those memories without being overwhelmed by the trauma." Assistant A. Park was already pulling up legal precedents on his laptop. "I'm finding several cases where courts have allowed emotional support animals during child testimony. The key is proving that the animal's presence is necessary for the witness to provide testimony and that it doesn't prejudice the jury." Sterling made her decision with the swift certainty that had made her one of the state's most successful prosecutors. "We're going to petition Judge Brennan for extraordinary accommodations. Dr. Chun, I need a comprehensive psychological evaluation explaining why Emma requires this support. Martinez, coordinate with Officer Morrison. I want to meet with him and Rex tomorrow. Park, research every legal precedent you can find and draft the most persuasive motion of your career." As the team dispersed with renewed energy and purpose, Sterling remained in the conference room, staring out at the courthouse where Emma Thompson's fate and Marcus Rivera's future would be decided in less than 2 weeks. She thought about Ashley Rodriguez, still recovering from her injuries, and about Emma's parents, who hadn't slept peacefully in 6 months. This was their last chance. A desperate gamble that would either bring justice to a dangerous criminal or result in his freedom to terrorize other innocent families. Everything now depended on whether a traumatized 3-year-old could find her voice in the presence of a German Shepherd named Rex, and whether Judge Brennan would allow such an unprecedented arrangement in his courtroom. The stakes had never been higher, and failure was not an option. Sterling picked up her phone to call Judge Brennan's chambers, knowing that the next conversation would determine whether justice would prevail or be silenced forever. Officer Jake Morrison's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted Rex's specially designed service vest in the parking garage beneath the Riverside County Courthouse. The navy blue fabric bore the insignia Victim Services K-9 in bold white letters, a designation that had taken 3 years of intensive training to achieve. The morning sun cast geometric shadows through the concrete structure as Morrison ran his fingers through Rex's thick German Shepherd coat, feeling the steady rhythm of the dog's breathing that always seemed to calm his own nerves before high pressure situations. "Today's different, isn't it, boy?" Morrison whispered, crouching to look directly into Rex's intelligent brown eyes. The 7-year-old dog tilted his head with that characteristic attentiveness that had made him legendary among victim advocates throughout Southern California. Rex had assisted in over 200 cases during his career, domestic violence survivors who couldn't speak about their abuse, elderly fraud victims too ashamed to report details, and countless children who found courage in his gentle presence. But never had the stakes been this monumental. Morrison's radio crackled with updates from the media circus gathered outside the courthouse. News vans lined the street, 3 deep, satellite dishes pointing skyward like modern monuments to public fascination with tragedy. Reporters from CNN, Fox News, and every local station in a 100-mile radius had descended on Riverside County to cover what legal experts were calling the most unusual criminal trial in California history. The story had captured national attention. Could a police dog really help a traumatized 3-year-old convict her attacker? The headlines had been relentless for the past week since Judge Brennan's surprising decision to allow Rex in the courtroom. Miracle dog to testify? Screamed the front page of the Los Angeles Times. Unprecedented legal gamble, declared the San Francisco Chronicle. Legal scholars debated the precedent on television talk shows while child advocacy groups hailed it as a revolutionary step forward in protecting young witnesses. Morrison understood the enormous responsibility resting on Rex's shoulders, or rather, paws. He'd read Emma Thompson's psychological profile a dozen times, studied her therapy session transcripts, and even watched security footage of her interactions with hospital therapy dogs. The child's transformation in the presence of animals was remarkable and consistent. Her selective mutism seemed to dissolve when she felt protected by a 4-legged guardian. "Officer Morrison?" A voice echoed across the parking garage. Dr. Rebecca Chen approached with quick, purposeful steps, her heels clicking against the concrete. Behind her walked Detective Sarah Martinez, looking like she hadn't slept in days, and Ada Monica Sterling, clutching a leather briefcase that contained the prosecution's entire case strategy. "How is he with crowds?" Dr. Chun asked, gesturing toward Rex, who had risen to a perfect sitting position, alert but relaxed. "The courtroom will be smaller than usual, but Emma will still sense the formal atmosphere and the presence of strangers." Morrison smiled with genuine pride. Rex has worked security at political rallies, assisted at crime scenes with dozens of officers present, and even helped during a bank robbery hostage situation last year. Crowds don't faze him. If anything, he becomes more focused and protective. When he senses tension, Dr. Chun knelt carefully, extending her hand for Rex to sniff. The dog's tail began a slow, measured wag as he assessed this new person. Emma's parents brought some of her clothing yesterday, so Rex could familiarize himself with her scent, she explained, pulling a small pink sweater from her bag. They're hoping it might help create an immediate bond. Rex's entire demeanor shifted as he caught Emma's scent on the sweater. His ears perked forward, and he took several steps closer to Dr. Chun, his nose working intently. Morrison watched in amazement. He'd never seen his partner react so strongly to a scent sample before. "That's incredible," Detective Martinez observed. "It's like he already knows Emma somehow." Sterling checked her watch nervously. "Judge Brennan wants to meet with Rex before the trial begins. He's never allowed an animal in his courtroom before. And frankly, he's getting pressure from the state appeals court to reconsider this whole arrangement. We need Rex to make a perfect impression." As they rode the elevator to the courthouse's main floor, Morrison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Rex had been rescued from a shelter as a puppy, originally trained for drug detection work. But Morrison had noticed something special about the dog's temperament during their early training, an unusual sensitivity to human emotion that went far beyond normal canine capabilities. When the county launched their victim services program, Rex had been a natural choice for additional training. The program had been controversial initially. Traditional law enforcement questioned whether police dogs should be used for emotional support rather than catching criminals, but the results spoke for themselves. Victims who had been unable to provide statements suddenly found their voices when Rex was present. Traumatized witnesses who flinched at every sound became calm and focused with the dog lying quietly nearby. The elevator doors opened to reveal a hallway packed with reporters and courthouse personnel trying to catch a glimpse of the famous police dog. Camera flashes erupted as Rex emerged, but the dog remained perfectly composed, his training taking over despite the chaos. Morrison kept Rex in a tight-heeled position as they navigated through the crowd toward Judge Brennan's chambers. "Officer Morrison, how confident are you that Rex can help Emma testify?" shouted a reporter from Channel 7. "Will this set a precedent for therapy animals in criminal trials?" called another journalist. Morrison ignored the questions, focusing entirely on Rex's behavior. The dog's calm professionalism in the face of mayhem was exactly what they needed. As they approached the judge's chambers, Morrison caught sight of Emma Thompson and her parents emerging from a side conference room. Little girl looked impossibly small in her carefully chosen purple dress, her dark hair pulled back with a matching ribbon. She walked between her parents, holding both their hands, her eyes wide with the overwhelming nature of the courthouse environment. When her gaze landed on Rex, everything changed. Emma stopped walking entirely, her mouth forming a small O of wonder. Rex, despite his disciplined training, seemed to sense her presence immediately. The dog's tail began wagging slowly, and he looked up at Morrison with an expression that seemed to ask permission. "Emma, honey, that's the special dog we told you about," Lisa Thompson said gently, kneeling beside her daughter. "His name is Rex, and he's here to help you feel brave." For the first time in 6 months, Emma Thompson smiled, genuinely, radiantly smiled. She took a tentative step toward Rex, then another, her fear melting away in the presence of this magnificent animal who seemed to understand her pain without words. Judge Brennan's door opened, and the 72-year-old jurist emerged with the skeptical expression of someone who'd seen every courtroom trick imaginable during his 3 decades on the bench. "So this is the famous Rex," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I hope you understand, Officer Morrison, that I'm allowing this arrangement against the advice of several colleagues. The appeals court is watching this case very closely." Morrison straightened to attention. "Your Honor, Rex has never failed to provide appropriate assistance to a trauma victim. His training is extensive, his temperament is perfect, and his presence has helped dozens of witnesses find the courage to seek justice." Judge Brennan studied Rex carefully, noting the dog's calm alertness and professional bearing. "The defense has argued that an animal's presence could prejudice the jury, making them more sympathetic to the prosecution's case regardless of the evidence." "With respect, Your Honor," Sterling interjected, "Emma Thompson is our key witness. Without her testimony, a dangerous criminal walks free. Rex isn't here to manipulate emotions. He's here to help a traumatized child access memories that could save other potential victims." As if understanding the gravity of the conversation, Rex moved closer to Emma, who had been watching the adult discussion with wide eyes. The dog sat perfectly beside her, creating an invisible bubble of safety around the little girl. Emma's hand moved instinctively to rest on Rex's head, and for the first time since that terrible night, she looked genuinely peaceful. Judge Brennan observed this interaction with growing amazement. 40 years of legal experience had taught him to trust his instincts about people, and apparently about dogs too. "Very well," he decided. "Rex will be permitted in my courtroom under strict conditions. He remains with Officer Morrison at all times, shows no aggressive behavior, and leaves immediately if he becomes disruptive." Emma looked up at the imposing judge, and in a voice barely above a whisper, said, "Thank you for letting the nice doggy help me." The breakthrough moment sent chills through everyone present. Dr. Chun quickly documented the interaction while Sterling felt the first surge of genuine hope she'd experienced in months. Morrison knelt beside Emma and Rex, watching as girl and dog seemed to communicate through some deeper understanding than words could provide. In less than 24 hours, this unlikely trio would enter a courtroom where justice hung in the balance. Everything depended on whether the bond forming between a traumatized child and a heroic police dog could overcome 6 months of silence and fear to speak the truth that would either convict or free a dangerous predator. The courthouse bells chimed 9 o'clock as the most anticipated trial in Riverside County history prepared to begin. Outside, protesters held signs reading "Justice for Ashley" and "Protect our children," while legal experts positioned themselves strategically for television interviews. Inside courtroom 3A, an unusual quiet had settled over the proceedings as Judge Harold Brennan implemented the most restrictive media controls of his career. Only 12 jurors, essential legal personnel, and the families directly involved were permitted to witness what everyone hoped would be a historic breakthrough. Marcus Rivera sat rigidly at the defense table, his Orange County jail jumpsuit replaced by an ill-fitting navy suit his attorney had provided. His dark eyes constantly scanned the room, calculating escape routes and weaknesses in the prosecution's case. At 28, Rivera had spent more years behind bars than free, and his extensive criminal record painted a picture of escalating violence. This trial represented either his final downfall or his greatest victory, walking free from attempted murder charges on a technicality. Defense attorney Patricia Walsh whispered final strategies to her client, her expensive briefcase containing psychological studies questioning the reliability of child witnesses under age 5. She'd built her career on creating reasonable doubt, and a traumatized toddler's potential testimony seemed like the weakest foundation imaginable for a murder conviction. "Remember," she told Rivera quietly, "even if she speaks, we destroy her credibility on cross-examination. 3-year-olds can't tell fantasy from reality." At the prosecution table, Ada Monica Sterling arranged her meticulously prepared notes one final time. Every question had been crafted with Dr. Chan's input to avoid re-traumatizing Emma while extracting crucial details. Sterling's opening statement had laid out the circumstantial evidence against Rivera, but she could see skepticism in several jurors' eyes. Without Emma's eyewitness identification, Rivera's conviction seemed increasingly unlikely. Dr. Rebecca Chun sat in the gallery's front row, monitoring Emma Thompson's vital signs through a small device connected to sensors hidden beneath the child's clothing. Emma's heart rate and stress indicators would alert Dr. Chun immediately if the courtroom environment became too overwhelming, triggering an immediate halt to proceedings. The innovative monitoring system had been Judge Brennan's condition for allowing such a young witness to testify. Emma herself sat between her parents in the witness waiting room, wearing her lucky purple dress and clutching Mr. Peanuts, her stuffed elephant. She'd eaten only half her breakfast strawberry pancakes, her favorite, and had asked 3 times if the nice doggy would really be there to protect her. Lisa Thompson smoothed her daughter's hair, while Michael paced nervously, both parents struggling with the agonizing decision to put their traumatized child through this ordeal. Officer Jake Morrison stood at attention near the courtroom's rear entrance, Rex lying calmly at his feet in perfect downstay position. The German Shepherd's ears remained alert to every sound, his training keeping him focused despite the unusual energy permeating the courtroom. Morrison had spent the previous evening reviewing Rex's greatest successes with traumatized witnesses, drawing confidence from their proven track record. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harold Brennan," announced the bailiff as the black-robed figure emerged from his chambers. Brennan had presided over thousands of cases, from petty theft to capital murder, but nothing had prepared him for the unprecedented nature of today's proceedings. Legal scholars from 3 major universities had submitted amicus briefs either supporting or condemning his decision to allow a therapy animal during testimony. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Judge Brennan began, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades on the bench, "today you will witness testimony under extraordinary circumstances. I want to remind everyone present that this courtroom remains a place of law and order, regardless of any accommodations made for our young witness. Rivera shifted uncomfortably as the judge's stern gaze swept across the courtroom. Something about the formal setup felt different today, more dangerous than previous hearings. His attorney had assured him that a 3-year-old's testimony would be easily discredited, but the elaborate preparations suggested the prosecution believed otherwise. The prosecution may call their first witness, Judge Brennan announced. Sterling rose with practiced confidence, though her palms were sweating inside her leather gloves. Your Honor, the people call Emma Thompson to the stand. The courtroom doors opened slowly, and Dr. Chun entered first, followed by Emma holding both her parents' hands. The little girl's eyes immediately darted around the formal space, taking in the imposing wood paneling, the elevated judge's bench, and the serious faces of 12 strangers in the jury box. Her breathing quickened, and her grip on Mr. Peanuts tightened visibly. "It's okay, sweetheart," Lisa Thompson whispered, but Emma had already begun to shut down. Her shoulders hunched forward, her head dropped, and that familiar glassy-eyed stare returned the same expression she'd worn for weeks after the attack. Dr. Chun's monitoring device showed Emma's heart rate spiking dangerously. Sterling approached the witness stand with careful, measured steps. "Hello, Emma. Can you tell? Use your name? Silence?" Emma's lips remained firmly pressed together as she stared at her shoes. "Emma, do you remember me? We talked yesterday about the nice people who want to hear your story." Still nothing. The little girl seemed to be retreating deeper into herself with each passing second. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably, clearly moved by the child's obvious distress, but uncertain about the ethics of pressing her to continue. Rivera's attorney leaned back in her chair with barely concealed satisfaction. This was playing out exactly as she'd predicted. The prosecution's star witness was too traumatized to provide any useful testimony. She began calculating how quickly she could move for dismissal once this charade concluded. Judge Brennan frowned deeply, clearly reconsidering his decision to allow such a young witness. "Dr. Chun, is the child able to continue?" Dr. Chun checked her monitoring device, noting Emma's elevated stress levels. "Your Honor, may I suggest we introduce the therapy animal as planned?" Emma's psychological profile indicates she responds dramatically to canine presence. Sterling nodded to the bailiff, who moved toward the rear door. Morrison straightened, knowing their moment had arrived. Everything they'd worked toward, all of Rex's training, Emma's healing, and the pursuit of justice for Ashley Rodriguez, now depended on what happened in the next 60 seconds. "Officer Morrison," Judge Brennan called, "please bring in your K9. Partner." The courtroom door opened silently, and Morrison entered with Rex walking in perfect heel position. The German Shepherd's presence immediately changed the energy in the room. His calm confidence seemed to emanate outward, creating an invisible circle of safety that even the adults could sense. Emma's head snapped up instantly, her traumatized expression dissolving as she caught sight of the magnificent dog. Rex's brown eyes found hers across the courtroom, and something extraordinary passed between them, a recognition, a promise, a moment of pure connection that transcended species. For the first time in 6 months, Emma Thompson sat up straight, released her death grip on Mr. Peanuts, and pointed directly at Rex with a finger that trembled not with fear, but with excitement. The entire courtroom held its breath, sensing that everything was about to change. Rivera's confident demeanor cracked as he watched the little girl's transformation. Something in her newly alert posture, her sudden focus, filled him with a dread he couldn't quite explain. This wasn't going according to plan. The silence in courtroom 3, stretched like a taut wire ready to snap, as Emma Thompson's small finger remained pointed at Rex, her face illuminated with the first genuine joy anyone had seen from her in 6 months. The German shepherd's intelligent brown eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that seemed to communicate across species, creating an invisible bridge of trust and understanding that transcended the formal barriers of the legal proceeding. "Good dog?" Emma's voice rang out crystal clear through the hushed courtroom, each syllable carrying the weight of months of suppressed trauma finally finding release. The two simple words exploded through the silence like thunder, causing Judge Brennan to grip his gavel, 12 jurors to lean forward simultaneously, and Marcus Rivera to feel his first stab of genuine terror in 20 years of criminal activity. Ada Monica Sterling felt her heart skip as she witnessed the miracle she'd prayed for but hardly dared expect. Dr. Rebecca Chun immediately checked her monitoring device, watching Emma's stress indicators plummet from dangerous levels to the normal range within seconds of Rex's appearance. Even the court reporter's fingers froze momentarily over her stenography machine, stunned by the dramatic shift in the child's demeanor. Rex's tail began wagging slowly, his professional training, allowing him to remain in position while acknowledging Emma's recognition. Officer Morrison watched in amazement as his partner seemed to understand the gravity of this moment, the dog's entire body language shifting into what Morrison privately called protection mode, alert, calm, and radiating an aura of safety that Emma absorbed like sunlight after months of darkness. "Emma," Dr. Chun said gently, seizing the breakthrough moment, "can you tell us about the scary night when the mean man hurt Ashley?" For a heartbeat, everyone feared Emma would retreat back into silence. Rivera's defense attorney, Patricia Walsh, had her hand poised over her legal pad, ready to object to any leading questions. But Emma's gaze never left Rex, drawing courage from the dog's steady presence, as if he were transferring his own bravery directly into her small heart. "The man was bad," Emma said clearly, her voice gaining strength with each word. "He made loud noises and broke Mommy's pretty things." Her finger moved from Rex to point with unwavering certainty at Marcus Rivera. "That man was mean to Ashley. He made her fall down and get always." The courtroom erupted. Rivera's face drained of all color as he realized his months of confident swagger had just evaporated in the span of 30 seconds. Walsh jumped to her feet, shouting objections about leading the witness and the unreliability of child testimony. But her words seemed to bounce harmlessly off the walls as Emma continued speaking with remarkable clarity. "He had red shoes," Emma continued, warming to her story as Rex's calming presence allowed her traumatic memories to surface without overwhelming fear. "Big red shoes that made loud sounds on the floor. And he had a scary mark on his face, right? Here." She touched her own forehead, indicating the exact location of Rivera's distinctive scar, a detail that had never been released to the public or mentioned in any media coverage. Rivera's hand instinctively moved to cover the jagged scar above his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a prison fight 3 years earlier. The gesture was subtle, but every person in the courtroom noticed it. Juror number 7, a retired schoolteacher named Margaret Foster, audibly gasped as the connection became unmistakable. "Tell us more about what you saw, Emma," Sterling encouraged, maintaining careful control over her voice despite her thundering heartbeat. Emma's small hand reached out to touch Rex's fur, and the contact seemed to unlock a floodgate of suppressed memories. "The scary man took Daddy's baseball bat from the garage. I saw him before when he looked in our windows. He talked on his phone and said bad words. He was looking for money boxes, but we don't have money boxes." Each detail hit Rivera like a physical blow. The reference to looking in windows matched his surveillance pattern from weeks before the break-in. The mention of money boxes referred to his phone conversation with accomplice Tony Vasquez about searching for safes or hidden cash. Information that only someone who is actually present could possibly know. Rivera leaned frantically toward his attorney, whispering urgent denials, but Walsh's confident demeanor had completely crumbled. She'd built her defense strategy on the assumption that a 3-year-old witness would be incoherent, unreliable, and easily discredited. Instead, Emma was providing a devastating account with details that corroborated every piece of circumstantial evidence the prosecution had compiled. "He hit Ashley with the bat," Emma continued, her voice remaining steady as long as her hand maintained contact with Rex's reassuring fur. "Ashley tried to protect me. She said, 'Run, Emma, hide,' but I was too scared. So I went to my closet and counted numbers until the police came." Judge Brennan found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed by the child's testimony. In 30 years on the bench, he'd never witnessed anything like this transformation. The same little girl who had been catatonic with fear just minutes earlier was now providing the most compelling eyewitness testimony he'd ever heard. Rivera's world was collapsing in real time. Every calculated risk he'd taken during the crime was being exposed by someone he'd never imagined could threaten him. He'd been so careful to wear gloves, except when handling the bat, so meticulous about avoiding the security cameras, so confident that no adult witness existed, but he'd never considered that a 3-year-old hiding in a closet could destroy his perfect crime. "Emma," Sterling asked carefully, "are you sure this is the man you saw that night?" Emma turned to look directly at Rivera, her innocent gaze meeting his desperate stare. Rex shifted slightly, positioning himself where Emma could see him while she faced her attacker. The dog's presence seemed to create an invisible shield around the child, allowing her to confront her nightmare without being consumed by it. "Yes," Emma said with absolute certainty that sent chills through every person present. "That's the scary man who hurt Ashley and broke our house." The simplicity and conviction in those words hit the courtroom like a sledgehammer. Rivera's last hope that this child would be too traumatized or confused to provide credible testimony had just evaporated. Walsh frantically scribbled notes about appeals and technicalities, but the damage was catastrophic and irreversible. Dr. Chon monitored Emma's stress levels throughout her testimony, amazed by the readings. Instead of the expected trauma response, Emma's vital signs indicated calm focus, as if Rex's presence had created a protective bubble around her psyche. The therapeutic bond between child and dog was performing exactly as hoped, allowing Emma to access painful memories without being overwhelmed by them. "He said Ashley was a stupid girl for fighting him," Emma added, providing yet another detail that matched Rivera's recorded jailhouse phone calls to his girlfriend. "And he said he would come back if we told anyone. But I'm telling because Rex is protecting me now." The courtroom remained absolutely silent, except for the soft scratching of the court reporter's machine capturing every word. Rivera slumped in his chair, the fight draining out of him, as he realized that his victim, child he'd barely noticed during the crime, had just delivered his life sentence with the innocent honesty that only a 3-year-old could provide. Sterling glanced at the jury box, reading the expressions of 12 citizens who had just witnessed something extraordinary. Gone was any skepticism about Emma's age or reliability. What they saw was a brave little girl telling the truth with the help of a remarkable dog who had somehow unlocked her voice exactly when justice needed it most. Emma continued petting Rex's soft fur as she concluded her testimony, completely unaware that her 2 words, "good dog," had just changed the course of American legal history and sealed the fate of the man who had tried to destroy her family's life. Emma Thompson's small hand remained firmly planted in Rex's thick fur as Ada Monica Sterling prepared for the most crucial cross-examination of her career. The German shepherd's calm breathing had become Emma's anchor to courage, each rise and fall of his chest reminding her that she was safe, protected, and finally ready to tell the truth that had been locked inside her traumatized mind for 6 agonizing months. "Emma," Can you tell us what the scary man looked like when he took off his mask? Sterling asked gently, positioning herself where Emma could see both her and Rex simultaneously. The strategy was delicate: extract crucial details without overwhelming the child or triggering another retreat into silence. Emma's brown eyes remained focused on Rex as she spoke, drawing strength from the dog's unwavering presence. He had mean eyes and angry face marks, she said, tracing lines on her own forehead. Right here, like someone scratched him with claws. Her innocent description of Rivera's distinctive scar sent murmurs through the jury box, where 12 citizens were beginning to understand they were witnessing something extraordinary. Marcus Rivera's hands clenched into fists beneath the defense table as Emma's childish words systematically destroyed every element of his carefully constructed alibi. He'd convinced himself that even if the kid spoke, her testimony would be gibberish, the confused ramblings of a traumatized toddler. Instead, she was providing a photographic account of details he'd forgotten anyone could have observed. Defense attorney Patricia Walsh knew her case was disintegrating in real time, but professional ethics required her to challenge the testimony. Your Honor, I object to this entire line of questioning. This child has clearly been coached, and her alleged memories are contaminated by months of therapy and leading questions. Judge Brennan's stern gaze fixed on Walsh. Overruled. The witness may continue. Dr. Rebecca Chun watched Emma's vital signs with growing amazement. Instead of the expected trauma spikes, the monitoring device showed patterns consistent with calm focus and emotional stability. Rex's presence wasn't just comforting Emma, it was actually allowing her to process traumatic memories without being overwhelmed by them. This was unprecedented in her 15 years of treating child trauma victims. Tell us about the phone call, Emma, Sterling continued, knowing this detail would be the prosecution's strongest evidence. What did the scary man say when he talked on his phone? Emma's face scrunched in concentration as she petted Rex's ear. He was mad at someone. He said, "There's no stupid safe here, Tony. Just kid toys and girl stuff." And then he said, "Really? Bad words that Mommy says I can't say." Her perfect recall of Rivera's conversation with accomplice Tony Vasquez sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Those exact words appeared in FBI wiretap transcripts that had never been made public. Rivera's attorney shot him a desperate look, but Rivera had gone pale as death. How could this child possibly know about Tony? That phone call had lasted less than 2 minutes, and he'd been certain no one was listening. The kid had been hiding upstairs somewhere. How had she heard his conversation so clearly? The scary man was looking for money, Emma continued, her confidence growing with each detail, as Rex's presence continued to shield her from traumatic overwhelm. But Daddy keeps our money in the bank, not in boxes. The man got really mad and threw Mommy's jewelry on the floor. He stepped on my picture from school and broke it. Sterling felt adrenaline coursing through her veins as Emma provided detail after detail that corroborated their evidence. Emma, how do you know it was a baseball bat that hurt Ashley? Because it was Daddy's special bat from when he played games in college, Emma replied matter-of-factly. It has his name written on it in black marker. The scary man took it from our garage before the bad night. I saw him in our backyard 3 times, always looking in windows when Mommy and Daddy weren't home. The revelation about Rivera's pre-crime surveillance sent Detective Sarah Martinez scrambling through her evidence files. Emma's testimony was providing missing pieces of their investigation timeline, painting a picture of premeditation that transformed the charges from burglary to first-degree attempted murder. Rivera's world was collapsing with each innocent revelation. He'd spent weeks casing the Thompson house, learning their routines, identifying vulnerabilities. But he'd never noticed the small face occasionally watching from an upstairs window. Never realized that his careful planning was being observed by the very witness who would ultimately destroy him. The scary man hurt Ashley because she tried to call for help. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger as Rex shifted position to rest his head closer to her feet. Ashley said, "Get away from here and leave this family alone." She was very brave, but the scary man was bigger and meaner. Ashley Rodriguez's parents, watching from the gallery, wept openly as Emma described their daughter's heroic final moments of consciousness. Ashley had spent 3 weeks in intensive care and still faced months of rehabilitation, but Emma's testimony was transforming her from victim to hero in the public consciousness. Walsh desperately attempted damage control. "Your Honor, this testimony is clearly the product of suggestion and false memory implantation. Children this age cannot reliably distinguish between reality and imagination, especially after months of therapy." But child development expert Dr. Michael Torres, called as the prosecution's final witness, systematically demolished Walsh's arguments. Traumatic memories in young children often display remarkable accuracy, he explained to the riveted jury. The emotional intensity of the experience creates what we call flashbulb memories, vivid, detailed recollections that can be accessed years later with surprising precision. Emma's ability to provide specific details that corroborate physical evidence actually supports the authenticity of her memories. Emma, meanwhile, had begun telling Rex about the aftermath of the attack as if the dog were her closest confidant. "I stayed in my closet for so long that my legs got sleepy," she confided to her furry protector. "I heard sirens and voices, but I was scared the scary man was pretending to be a policeman. So I waited until I heard Mommy crying my name before I came out." Rivera buried his face in his hands as Emma's words painted a devastating picture of the terror he'd inflicted on an innocent family. Every calculated element of his crime was being exposed by someone he'd never considered a threat, someone whose very existence he'd barely acknowledged during those 3 hours of violence and destruction. "The scary man said he would hurt my whole family if anyone told about him," Emma added, looking directly at Rivera with the fearless honesty that only children possess. "But Ashley said before she got hurt that bad men can't win if good people are brave. So I'm being brave now because Rex is helping me." The power of those words, delivered with such simple conviction, silenced every objection Walsh might have raised. 12 jurors looked at Emma Thompson and saw not a confused child or unreliable witness, but a brave little girl who had endured unimaginable trauma and was now finding the courage to seek justice for herself and her beloved babysitter. Sterling concluded her examination, knowing that Emma's testimony had exceeded every expectation. The circumstantial evidence that had seemed insufficient was now corroborated by an eyewitness, whose innocent honesty was more compelling than any forensic report. Rivera's conviction had transformed from unlikely to inevitable, all because a 3-year-old had found her voice in the presence of a remarkable police dog, who understood that sometimes the most important job is simply providing comfort to those who need it most. As Emma concluded her testimony with a final pat to Rex's head, the courtroom remained in stunned silence, processing the reality that 2 words, "good dog," had just ensured that a dangerous predator would never again terrorize innocent families. The jury deliberation room on the 3rd floor of the Riverside County Courthouse buzzed with intense discussion as 12 citizens grappled with the most emotionally charged case any of them had ever witnessed. Margaret Foster, the retired elementary school teacher serving as jury foreman, spread Emma's testimony transcript across the polished conference table while her fellow jurors examined crime scene photographs and evidence logs with newfound clarity. "I've taught thousands of children over 35 years," Foster declared, removing her reading glasses to address her peers. That little girl was telling the absolute truth. You can't coach that kind of detail, that kind of emotional authenticity. When she described hiding in her closet, counting to 1,000,000, my heart broke. And when she pointed at Rivera with such certainty, there wasn't a shadow of doubt in her voice. Juror number 4, construction foreman Bill Rodriguez, no relation to Ashley, nodded emphatically. The way she described that scar on his forehead, and then Rivera immediately covered it with his hand, that was pure instinct. Guilty people always give themselves away. In the courthouse's victim services room, Emma Thompson sat contentedly on a child-sized chair, coloring pictures of dogs while Rex lay beside her like a patient guardian. Officer Jake Morrison watched in amazement as the same child who had been catatonic with fear just hours earlier now hummed quietly to herself, occasionally showing Rex her artwork and explaining which crayons were her favorites. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. "Look, Rex," Emma whispered conspiratorially, holding up a drawing of a purple dog wearing a police badge. "This is you being a hero dog. Mommy says heroes get special treats." Dr. Rebecca Chun documented every interaction between Emma and Rex, knowing that this case would fundamentally change how courts handle traumatized child witnesses across the country. Emma's stress indicators had remained in the normal range throughout her entire testimony, a result she'd never seen in 15 years of treating trauma victims. Rex wasn't just providing emotional support. He was somehow allowing Emma to access painful memories without being overwhelmed by them. 3 floors below, Marcus Rivera sat in a holding cell, his expensive suit wrinkled and sweat-stained as he finally grasped the magnitude of his situation. For 6 months, he'd been confident that lack of adult witnesses meant automatic acquittal. His attorney had assured him that even if the kid testified, no jury would convict based on a toddler's confused memories. But Emma Thompson's testimony had been anything but confused. It was devastatingly accurate, remarkably detailed, and delivered with the kind of innocent honesty that no defense strategy could overcome. Rivera replayed Emma's words obsessively, searching for inconsistencies or errors his attorney could exploit on appeal. But every detail she'd provided matched the evidence perfectly. The red sneakers he'd worn were still in his apartment when police arrested him. The scar she'd described was visible to anyone who looked closely at his face. Most damning of all, her quote of his phone conversation with Tony Vasquez matched FBI wiretaps word for word. His cellmate, a veteran criminal named Eddie Torino, watched Rivera's breakdown with professional detachment. "Sounds like that little girl buried you deep, Hermano," Torino observed. "Kids don't lie about stuff like that. They don't know how." Meanwhile, Ashley Rodriguez sat in the courthouse cafeteria with her parents, Maria and Carlos, awaiting the verdict that would determine whether her nightmare had meaning. The 19-year-old still bore visible scars from Rivera's attack, a jagged line across her left cheek and permanent nerve damage in her right arm that ended her dreams of becoming a professional pianist. But Emma's testimony had transformed Ashley's perception of that horrible night from senseless victimization to heroic sacrifice. "I'm so proud of that brave little girl," Ashley whispered, dabbing tears from her eyes. She remembered everything. "I told her about good people being brave. Even at 3 years old, she understood." Dr. Chun had spent the lunch break interviewing Emma about her experience, documenting quotes that would later be studied by child psychologists worldwide. "Rex made me feel like Ashley was there, protecting me again," Emma had explained in her matter-of-fact way. "When I looked at the scary man, Rex was like having a big, strong friend who wouldn't let anything bad happen." The implications were staggering. Emma hadn't just overcome her selective mutism she'd demonstrated. How therapeutic animals could unlock testimony from witnesses previously considered unable to participate in legal proceedings. Children with autism, elderly dementia patients, sexual assault survivors with PTSD, countless victims might benefit from similar accommodations. At exactly 2:47 p.m., the jury room buzzer sounded. After only 97 minutes of deliberation, remarkably quick for an attempted murder trial. The 12 citizens had reached their unanimous decision. Bailiffs immediately notified all parties to return to courtroom 3A for the reading of the verdict. Rivera's legs felt like liquid as sheriff's deputies escorted him back to the defense table. Patricia Walsh had spent the brief deliberation frantically, researching appeal strategies, but she knew her client's fate was sealed. Emma's testimony had been too specific, too detailed, and too emotionally authentic for any appeal to succeed. Judge Brennan entered to a courtroom packed beyond capacity despite his earlier restrictions. Word of Emma's breakthrough had spread. Throughout the courthouse, and court employees, off-duty attorneys, and even janitors had found excuses to witness this historic moment. Rex lay quietly near the prosecution table, while Emma sat between her parents in the front row, occasionally waving at her canine hero. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Brennan asked formally. Margaret Foster stood with the gravity befitting. "This moment, we have, Your Honor. On the charge of breaking and entering, how do you find guilty?" Rivera's shoulders sagged as if he'd been physically struck. "On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree? Guilty." The courtroom erupted in thunderous applause that continued for nearly 2 minutes, despite Judge Brennan's gavel. Emma clapped her hands excitedly, not fully understanding the legal proceedings, but sensing the celebration around her. Rex's tail wagged slowly as he absorbed the positive energy filling the room. Rivera's head dropped to the defense table in complete defeat. Walsh placed a hand on his shoulder, but her client was beyond consolation. 25 years to life stretched ahead of him, all because he'd underestimated the memory and courage of a 3-year-old witness. "Mr. Rivera," Judge Brennan announced, his voice cutting through the celebration, "you will be sentenced in 30 days. Until then, you remain in custody without possibility of bail." As deputies moved to escort Rivera from the courtroom, he turned for one final look at Emma Thompson. The little girl who had destroyed his freedom was now hugging Rex enthusiastically, whispering what appeared to be secrets into the dog's attentive ears. For just a moment, Rivera glimpsed the childhood innocence he'd tried to shatter, and perhaps for the first time in his criminal career, he felt something approaching genuine remorse. Emma looked up from Rex and caught Rivera's stare. Instead of fear, her expression showed something far more powerful: pity. "Bye-bye, scary man," she said simply. "I hope you learn to be nice now." Those words, spoken with such pure, childlike forgiveness, followed Rivera out of the courtroom and would haunt him for the rest of his incarceration. He'd expected hatred, fear, or anger from his victims. Instead, a 3-year-old had offered him grace he didn't deserve and certainly hadn't earned. As the courtroom gradually emptied, Emma remained with Rex and Officer Morrison, chattering excitedly about her very good helper dog and planning future visits. Her selective mutism had vanished completely, replaced by the natural chatter of a healthy 3-year-old who had reclaimed her voice and, more importantly, her sense of safety in the world. Dr. Chun packed up her monitoring equipment with tears of professional joy streaming down her face. Emma's recovery was complete, but more than that, they'd discovered a revolutionary approach to helping traumatized witnesses that would benefit countless victims for generations to come. Justice had been served, but the real victory was watching. Emma Thompson skipped hand in hand with her parents toward the courthouse exit, her laughter echoing through the marble halls as she planned her next adventure with the remarkable police dog who had given her back her voice. 2 years had passed since Emma Thompson's 2 simple words transformed American criminal justice, and the ripple effects continued to spread across the nation like waves from a stone dropped in still water. On this crisp October morning, exactly 24 months after the night that changed everything, Emma bounced excitedly in the back seat of her parents' Honda Pilot as they drove toward Riverside Memorial Park for their weekly visit with Officer Jake Morrison and Rex. Now 5 years old and bursting with confidence, Emma chattered nonstop about her kindergarten class, her upcoming birthday party, and her latest drawings of police dogs wearing superhero capes. Her selective mutism had become a distant memory, replaced by the natural exuberance of a healthy child who had not only survived trauma, but emerged stronger because of it. "Did you bring the special treats for Rex?" Emma asked for the third time, pressing her face against the car window as they pulled into the park's familiar parking lot. Her backpack contained homemade peanut butter cookies shaped like bones, a recipe she'd insisted on learning specifically for her canine hero. Michael Thompson smiled at his daughter through the rearview mirror, marveling at the transformation. That continued to amaze him daily. The shy, traumatized child who had once refused to leave her parents' side now fearlessly climbed jungle gyms, befriended every child in her class, and announced regularly that she planned to become the best police officer in the whole world, just like Officer Jake, but with better treats for my dog partner. Lisa Thompson documented Emma's progress in a leather journal she'd kept since the trial, recording milestones both large and small. Emma's first full night's sleep without nightmares. Her first day back at preschool without separation anxiety. The morning she'd asked, completely unprompted, to visit Ashley Rodriguez in the hospital to check on her Owies. Each entry represented another step in their family's journey from victims to survivors to advocates. The Emma's Voice Foundation, established 6 months after Rivera's conviction, had already placed therapy dogs in 43 courthouses across 12 states. The nonprofit organization, housed in a converted warehouse in downtown Riverside, received funding from corporations, celebrities, and thousands of individual donors inspired by Emma's story. Their mission statement, written in Emma's own words during a board meeting, reads simply, "Every scared kid should have a good doggy friend to help them be brave." Rex bounded across the park's open field with the enthusiasm of a dog half his age, his 9 years showing only in the distinguished gray patches around his muzzle. His fame had opened doors that traditional police work never could. Appearances on national television shows, invitations to speak at law enforcement conferences, and even a children's book deal that would donate all proceeds to victim services programs. Officer Morrison jogged behind his partner, amazed by Rex's continued energy and dedication, despite becoming the most famous police dog in American history. Their victim assistance caseload had tripled since Emma's trial, with requests coming from prosecutors nationwide who had heard about the miracle dog who helped traumatized witnesses find their voices. "Rex, Officer Jake," Emma squealed, launching herself into Morrison's arms for their traditional greeting hug before dropping to her knees to shower Rex with affection. The German shepherd's tail wagged furiously as he endured Emma's enthusiastic kisses and immediately began searching her pockets for the treats he knew she always brought. "How's my favorite witness doing?" Morrison asked, using their special greeting that never failed to make Emma giggle. "I'm not a witness anymore," Emma corrected with 5-year-old logic. "Now I'm a helper. Dr. Chun says I help other scared kids by showing them how Rex makes everything okay." Indeed, Emma had become an unofficial spokesperson for the foundation, visiting children's hospitals and trauma centers, with Rex to demonstrate how therapy animals could help kids process difficult experiences. Her natural empathy and remarkable resilience made her uniquely qualified to comfort other young victims, and her presence often achieved breakthroughs that traditional therapy had failed to provide. Ashley Rodriguez approached across the grass, walking with only the slightest limp from her injuries. Now 21 and studying criminal justice at UC Riverside, Ashley had become Emma's honorary big sister and the foundation's most passionate advocate. The scars on her face had faded considerably, but more importantly, the psychological scars had healed through therapy and her involvement in helping other trauma survivors. "Emma, I brought pictures from my graduation ceremony," Ashley called out, holding up a manila envelope. And guess who was in the front row cheering for me? Emma squealed with delight as Ashley showed her photographs from the previous month's graduation, where Emma had sat proudly in the audience, wearing a tiny cap and gown that Ashley's parents had specially made for the occasion. In every photo, Rex sat perfectly beside Emma, both of them beaming with pride for Ashley's achievement. The foundations. Latest success story involved 8-year-old Carlos Mendez, whose testimony about witnessing a gang shooting had seemed impossible until Rex's presence helped him overcome his terror of retaliation. The conviction had led to the dismantling of an entire criminal organization, proving that Emma's breakthrough had created a replicable model for justice. Dr. Chun arrived pushing a stroller containing her own 18-month-old daughter, Sophia, who had become Emma's self-appointed little sister, and Rex's biggest fan after Emma herself. The psychologist's research on animal-assisted therapy for trauma victims had been published in the Journal of Child Psychology and featured on the cover of Time magazine under the headline, "When Dogs Become Heroes." "Emma, I have exciting news," Dr. Chun announced as Sophia clapped excitedly at seeing Rex. "The governor signed the Emma Thompson Act yesterday. Every courthouse in California will now have therapy animals available for child witnesses." Emma's eyes widened with amazement. "They named a law after me? Like a real law that helps kids?" Morrison knelt beside Emma, his voice filled with genuine emotion. "You started something incredible, Emma, because you were brave enough to tell the truth. With Rex's help, thousands of other children will have the same chance to find their voices." The group settled onto picnic blankets as Emma distributed her homemade treats to Rex, who accepted each cookie with the dignified patience of a dog who understood his importance in the world. Sophia toddled between the adults, babbling in her own language while Rex watched protectively, already demonstrating the same intuitive care for vulnerable children that had made him legendary. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the park, Emma curled up against Rex's warm side for their traditional nap time. The nightmares that had once plagued her sleep had been replaced by dreams of adventure, of helping other children, and of the police dog academy she planned to attend when she grew up. "Rex," Emma whispered sleepily, "did you know you're the most famous dog in the whole world?" Rex's answer was a gentle lick across Emma's cheek and a contented sigh as he settled into position as her guardian. Somewhere across the city, Marcus Rivera sat in his maximum security cell, serving year 2 of his 25-year sentence. His appeals had been denied, his accomplices had been convicted based on Emma's testimony, and his name had become synonymous with the case that proved even the smallest voices could deliver the mightiest justice. But in this peaceful moment under the California sun, surrounded by the family that had supported her through the darkest time of her young life, Emma Thompson slept peacefully against the side of the remarkable police dog who had helped her find her voice, change the legal system, and prove that sometimes the greatest heroes come on 4 legs with hearts bigger than their badges. The story that began with 2 words, "good dog," had become a legacy of courage, healing, and hope that would protect vulnerable children for generations to come. Emma's nightmare had transformed into other children's dreams of safety, and Rex's gentle strength had redefined what it meant to serve and protect the most innocent members of society.